Hi, after many years of property investment, I found that there are the three greatest mistakes that people make when they buy property. And that is that they buy the wrong kind of property, they pay the wrong price for their properties, and they buy them in the wrong place. The three P's. So it's property, price, place. I'm Neil Foster of Organic Growth. I'm a property coach. I'm an investor myself, and I've been a property practitioner for more than 30 years. So let's get stuck into this. In the short video, I want to discuss the first of the three mistakes, and that is the wrong property. Many people they get it into their minds after reading a book by somebody like Robert Kiyosaki, and that property investment is a very good idea. And they think about it and say, "Oh, I'm going to make a lot of money." And yes, you can make a lot of money in property, but you've got to get the fundamentals correct. And the first fundamental is what kind of property you're going to buy. There's lots out there. You can buy a house, a normal standalone house with a garden and your own fence around it. You can buy holiday accommodation, and this is a big mistake. I've seen people go on holiday, they've got time to think, and say, "I must buy property," and they see a holiday flat available, and they see what the rentals paid that are charged per day, and they rush headlong in and they buy this flat as an investment, and it really crashes and burns after a very short while. You can buy flats. Now, when I say flats, I'm talking about small units that are normally in a block with retail below. So you've got a shopping centre below and flats above. We'll go into a bit more detail there. Then, of course, you've got the various kinds of land. You can buy stands and plots and farms in various cases, various forms, or you can buy clusters. Now, a cluster is it's particularly in South Africa, you find clusters. We have homes on their own stands, but they're within a secure environment. And security is the biggest option there, and lifestyle. And then, of course, you have townhouses, which is my favorite, and I'll tell you a bit more later. But if you ever played the game Monopoly, I challenge you to think back on playing Monopoly. You'll find that the people who buy up all the land don't necessarily win the game. You've got to buy rental producing properties, and you buy the most expensive rental producing properties in the game of Monopoly. And Monopoly will teach you a lot about property investment, but obviously it's a bit simplified. So let's get stuck into the actual the types of property, and I just want to discuss each one of them in detail, and hopefully the picture will clear up a bit. The first thing is I'd like to give you just a word on your own house. I ask you to please wrap your head around this. Your house is not an investment. I consider your house a necessary evil. You're either going to pay your own bond or somebody else's bond. But the fundamental reasons why you bought your house weren't investment based. You bought your house because your spouse liked the view, or it was close to your children's schools, or close to work, or whatever the reasons were, but they weren't necessarily the right factors to give you a great investment. And you're living in it, so you're not getting income from it. And if you read anything that Robert Kiyosaki has to say, the way to define the difference between an asset and a liability is, if you lose your job, your asset is going to feed you, a liability is going to eat you. And the house you're living in is going to eat you. You've got maintenance costs, you've got your rates, your taxes, your bond repayment costs, and there's no income. So let's just call it what it is. It's a liability, a necessary one. You need to live there. Most people, just a couple more things on your house, most people actually live their whole lives in a home that they never own. They're effectively paying rent. As an pure investment, you have all those expenses like your maintenance, your rates, your levies, your interest on your bond are not tax deductible, and you're paying for all of those costs out of after-tax money. So after your salary or your income, you then pay tax, and based on what you have left over, you're paying all these costs. So it's very expensive. There's no tax benefits there at all. And your house doesn't always, you might say to me, look, your house is going to go up in value. It doesn't always go up in value. It depends on lots of factors. If you bought in the wrong area, it might go up in value, but not in real terms. It might be behind inflation. And investors don't buy purely on capital growth, because capital growth is something you see in a few years' time if you did everything correct and if the market behaved correctly. So you can't rely on capital growth only if you want to be a property investor. And then, of course, the opportunity costs are tremendous. If you go and overcapitalize on the house that you live in, you're paying this massive bond. You'll find you won't have spare money to go and purchase other properties, other investment properties. So be careful when you're buying your own house that you don't spend too much, and don't leave enough of your income available to purchase investment properties. But on a positive note, if you carefully use your home loan in some kind of a flexible facility that the banks offer, saving money in your home loan is a very good place to save up for that next deposit on your next investment property. That's enough about your actual house. Let's look at holiday accommodation. The reason I don't like holiday accommodation is it's normally, you don't normally live in that place that you're buying the holiday accommodation. If, for example, you lived in a beachside town and you could keep a tight rein on it, you can manage it yourself, then yes, by all means, buy holiday accommodation, and you can do your homework properly and you can manage it yourself. But if you're going to try and manage holiday accommodation remotely, you're in for trouble. I've known many people who've got burnt there. To really make holiday accommodation work, you've got to be able to get new tenants in and out almost daily. So you need all that infrastructure, you need your cleaners and everyone all ready. So it's very difficult to keep it going efficiently. And then, of course, you have the months of the year when there's no tenants, when it's off season. So I would avoid holiday accommodation as an investment. Then flats is the next one. Now with flats, by flats I mean typically you have these residential units that are above 1 or 2 floors of retail units. South Africa, you see a lot of these in the established suburbs, where and they can work as investments, but you have to be very careful. The things to look out for is the parking. Make sure your tenants have got good parking, secure parking, and you got to make sure generally of the tenant security. How do they access the complex? And then one of the dangers of buying flats is you have no control about the retail on the ground floor. And for all you know, a sex shop and a bottle store and who else could be next door to it. And now you're living above a sex shop, or you're living above a bottle store with drunken people hanging around, and you really, that's going to affect your tenants and so forth. So I tend to avoid flats unless it's tucked away in a really nice suburb where it's all residential, the parking is secure, and all those fundamentals are in place. Then you can do well. Clusters is the next one. A cluster is effectively a house on its own garden and area within a controlled environment. And these can work as investments, but your holding costs tend to be quite expensive. Your levies, you have a levy and a homeowner's levy. And it's very difficult to recover all these costs from a tenant. I found that if you buy a cluster, they're very attractive for people to buy and live in, which pushes the purchase price of clusters up, but the rentals are not as high. And you'll find it very difficult to cover your costs of all your levies and your bonds and so forth. So they're difficult to buy as an investor, and they're also difficult to maintain, because in addition to the maintenance inside your unit, you have to look after the garden and the roof and the gutters and so forth, which if you had to buy in a townhouse complex, all those things are covered for you. The next type of property you can invest in is land. And by that I mean vacant land, plots. You get stands within a new development, so you'll have a new development being formed where they sell individual stands, like in a cluster development. They'll sometimes sell you can buy a stand in a cluster development, and then build your own house on it and so forth. Those things, you can make money there if you really know what you're doing, but as an investor I stay away from those. I'd rather buy income producing properties, and I'm not going to get burnt. I know of people who bought land inside developments with the idea of either selling the land on in a year's time, they're speculating, or they plan to build and then sell the property on, and then the market changes, which it did in South Africa in 2008, 2009, where suddenly the banks were withholding finance, and all that kind of new development was really frozen. And then you're sitting with a stand that you're paying your bond on, And if you don't develop, very often in these developments, the developer fines you if you don't pay, if you don't start building within a certain period. So I'd really avoid those as investments. If you're a developer, by all means, go for it. You can make a lot of money there, but you need to be careful. And so lastly, I don't want to be totally negative about all this because there's a real positive in that, and that is townhouses. I really believe that the right kind of property is buying townhouses. And I've written an article or two on it, and below this video you'll see a link to those articles where I go into a bit more detail as to why I think townhouses are great investments. But to summarize it, basically when you buy a townhouse, you're in a complex, you're buying a unit in a complex, and in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg, typically half the units are owned by investors and the other half are owned by the people who actually live in them. So in a complex of 100 units, you've got 50 other owners looking after your investment for you. You've got 50 other people with a vested interest living in the complex. When the gardens aren't up to standard, or when the security is down or something, they will be your eyes and ears, and they'll bring this to the body corporate manager's attention and sort it out for you. So it becomes effortless from that point of view. You have a body corporate looking after your gardens and after the exterior of the property, so you don't have to get involved in that. You literally only have to worry about maintaining the inside of the property, and you handle that with your lease agreement and your property manager. The townhouses offer resort facilities which are very attractive to tenants, and townhouses are typically very attractive to tenants, but not necessarily as attractive to a family wanting to build a home and live there forever. So you're not competing with that market of people who are established and want to live there forever. You literally people who buy townhouses to live in are typically wanting to live there for a couple of years while they're getting themselves established. So the result of all this is that the purchase price of the units aren't as high as a normal house in the suburb, and yet your tenants, it's very attractive for your tenants. They get to use all those resort facilities, they get the security, and it's a real lock-up and go environment for your tenants. So there's a lot going for tenants, for investment in townhouses. And as I said, below there's a link to one or two of the articles I've written and are published on the Organic Growth website. So that's all we're going to deal with in this video. Look out for video number 2 in the series, where I'm going to talk about the wrong place. By that is, how do you go about selecting the correct environment to invest in property. So until next video, cheerio.